Well, good morning. Happy Monday. It is Monday, May 20th. Can you believe May 20th? Oh my goodness, we're almost through the month of May, and then it'll be June. And you know, the interesting thing about this May is that I don't think we've hit 100 degrees yet. Somebody said yesterday, I thought, isn't it cooler this year? And someone came up to me and said, yeah, it's we haven't normally this time of May we've hit 100 degrees during the as the high for the day, but we haven't done that yet. So here we are, and I think the high today is going to be well, it's going to be less than, I can't remember what it was going to be. 91, I think, is the high today. It's definitely less than 100 degrees, and that is just absolutely amazing to me. Absolutely amazing. This has been an unusual year. We had a lot of rain early in the year, which made everything green. So I do worry about wildfires because all that brush, without any rain, all that brush is prime real estate for wildfires. And then we haven't had a day into the hundreds yet. I was sitting out last night on the back patio. It was just lovely. It was glorious. I mean, there were these little flying bugs, which I don't like. I mean, it's not like they're mosquitoes. They're just flying bugs, and they don't land on you, and they really don't. I mean, they're not a big problem. But other than that, it was just an absolutely beautiful evening last night. It has been for the last, I don't know, month. It's just been so gorgeous outside. My goodness. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Hope you have a great day. Couple things. First of all, birthday. We have one birthday today, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Brenda Prill. Happy birthday, Brenda. Thank you for all the coffee that you make. Let's see. Also, a little bit of housekeeping. We meet this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then next week is summer camp, and so I won't be broadcasting. And then the following week, I'm moving my son from Houston, Texas to Janesville, Minnesota. And so that'll take the whole week. And hopefully I'll get back in time to preach on Sunday. It's only, I think it's an 18-hour drive from Austin to Janesville. So we should be able to do it rather nicely. But it's one of those things that we have to, we'll get there when we get there. So we won't meet next week or the following week. And let's see, what else should I say? I think that's about it. So we did the birthdays, we did the housekeeping, had a great weekend, beautiful weekend. We had worship on Sunday morning. This sounded great. You get to this time of year and there's so many things going on. It's, we had graduation. We recognized the seniors, but none of them they're all gone for different things. And so we put their names up and said hi and thanked them. But this time of year, there's all sorts of things that people do. One is if you have somebody in college that's graduating and you're going to that, I mean, that's going to take you out of town. Anyway, all right. So enough of that. We will get into our study. We're getting near to the end of 2 Samuel. And David is at the end, nearing the end of his career as king. And as he's doing so, he decided he wanted to take a census of all of Israel and Judah. We talked about this a little bit earlier. But imagine you are living in the territory of Arizona, and all of a sudden, the governor of Arizona wants to come in and count how much money you have or how many babies you have. Now, it's probably not, it's probably not as difficult for us to think about today because we expect these sort of things. But it was really back then a violation of a person's property and civil, I'm the master of my household, not you. In the Jewish faith, the man went to the synagogue, he learned and talked about faith, and then he came back and taught the faith to his family. It was very, very much the family is sacred. Anything you do in the confines of your own family is you and you alone. And nobody has a right to come in and separate that. And even today, we have a little bit of that thought in the United States, although it seems to be eroding over time, because you end up with really, really, really bad actors that do really, really bad and damaging things to some of their family, long-lasting damaging things that the society ends up, fixing, I guess you could say. Society has to fix the damage that's done to people that grow up in horrible situations. And so society feels as if it has a little bit of a role in making sure that every child is safe, I guess you could say. Not so much so in the ancient world. If you had children, they were yours. Not necessarily property, although in some cultures for sure. Spouses were wives were yours. Not necessarily property, in many cultures they were. And people protected those things. This is my domain. It's not your domain. And so when David conducts a census, he has to go and count all the people. This means, it means opening up the curtain of their life and peeking through. And a lot of people don't want that. So it's not a good thing. Let me put it that way. So he tells Joab to go and count. Joab says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And David says, "Yes, I want to do this. I need to know how many people are in my kingdom so I can have pride in knowing how big our kingdom is." And Joab doesn't argue with David, but he knows it won't go well. And so this is kind of where we pick up the story. This is 2 Samuel chapter 24, beginning of verse 5. This is the group that's going after the census. After crossing the Jordan, they camped near Eror, south of the town in the gorge, and then went through Gad and onto Jazer. They went to Gilead and the region of Tatim and Hadshi, and onto Dan, Gene, around towards Sidon. They went toward the fortress of Tyre and all the towns of the Hivites and the Canaanites, and finally they went on to Beersheba in the land of Judah. Beersheba in the Negev of Judah. So this is as far north as you can go and about as far south as you can go. Tyre and Sidon are way up north along the coast of the Mediterranean. And so they went all the way up there and then went all the way down to the Negev, and they counted all these people. How many people, how many fighting men do we have? And verse 8. And after they had gone through the entire land, they came back to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. And Joab reported the number of fighting men to the king. In Israel, this is to the north, there were 800,000 able-bodied men who could handle a sword, and in Judah, 500,000 men who could handle a sword. So it's basically 800 and 500 is 1,300,000. So it'll be 1.3 million men that can fight for David. So if he has to mobilize an army, if he was being attacked by somebody of a large contingency, he would know where he could go to get these men and how much he could gather and how much food and materials and supplies would be required to prosecute a war. And we think to ourselves, well, this is kind of cool, to know how many fighting men you have. But it comes with a price. And the price is, as Joab knocks on every house and all of his men knock on every house, they're invading the sacredness of the family in each of these places. And so as David's doing this, as Joab is doing this, it's building up animosity. And the reason why I say that is because it doesn't really say that. David gets this report from Joab, but the very next sentence in verse 10 is this: David was conscience-stricken after he had counted the fighting men, and he said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done such a very foolish thing. So it doesn't say that the people were angry. And it doesn't say this conversation that David had with Joab about how he riled up the hornet's nest as he went and did the census. But you can infer it that when David hears from Joab that there's 1.3 million men, Joab probably also told David, and by the way, this did not go well. The people were not happy about this, King David. This was an invasion of their sense of privacy. People don't like opening. People like their privacy. At least me. I like my privacy. Every man's dream is to have 40 acres out in the middle of nowhere that you can have your own domain, have your own castle. It has its own well. It has its own crops and foods, and has all the things that allow you to sustain yourself kind of off the grid. And you have to fight against nature and battle the elements to be in charge of your own castle. This is a dream. It's not, in my experience, it's not been everybody's dream. That there are some people who love the interaction with society. They need other relationships. They don't like being out on the grid. They like being close into town. They like having all the other people and the town support around them. And so this is often a battle in households. Some people want to live out, some people want to live in, and so they come together and they find a place to raise a family. I personally love the idea of living out in the middle of nowhere, but it would be very, very hard. Trying to get the kids to school, trying to have relationships, all the things that are relationship based are harder when you're out in the middle of nowhere. But if you're the king and the master of your domain, there's just something about it that's very, very appealing. What I find interesting is a lot of people are leaving the cities. Demographers have noticed that because people can conduct their business online, and because a lot of business is online, there are many, many companies that are allowing you to work from home, especially during the COVID and the pandemic. We saw a lot of people work from home, and a lot of them haven't gone back to work. Some companies have insisted that people go back to work. Others have said, but I like working from home, and this is a big battle that we'll have for a while. But in some jobs, truly working from home is not a problem at all. It's actually much more productive. And so those people that can work from home are fighting to be able to work from home. So they can wake up in the morning and stay in their sweatpants and leisurely do their work from home during the day. And so these people are leaving the cities. And you'd think they'd be going to the suburbs, but they're not. The demographers are saying they're going to a place called the exurbs. And the exurbs is the next ring outside of the suburbs of a major city. So, for example, here in Tucson, I think you might say that Vail is probably a suburb that looks a lot like an exurb. But Tucson eventually will go through Vail. So at some point, Vail will be a part of the city of Tucson as Tucson expands out. May not happen in my lifetime, but it'll happen within the next 50 years. And then we won't be in the suburb or the exurbs. We'll be in the city of Tucson. And then people, if they want to really kind of get away from it all, they'll move out to the next ring. And this is what demographers are noting, is that people want to move to be like within 45 minutes or 30 minutes of a major town, but out in the middle of an area where you can have 5 acres or 10 acres of land or something like that. And being able to live that kind of peaceful, non-rushed lifestyle, but still be able to have a wonderful, high-paying job. Because typically in the exurbs, those areas, they don't hire you for your skill set. They hire you because you're a warm body. And so you don't, if you're a whatever, you don't get hired because of whatever. You get hired because you can learn a trade, or you can do a skill set that the town needs, or the exurb needs. Anyway, so when people don't like being told what to do. That's the bottom line. So David is conscience stricken, and it doesn't say this, but this is what it says. He was conscience stricken, and he says, "Lord, I'm guilty. What must I do?" And before David got up the next morning, this is verse 11, the word of the Lord had come to Gad the prophet, David's seer. "Go and tell David, this is what the Lord says. I'm giving you 3 options. Choose one of them for me to carry out against you." So the Lord speaks through Gad, who's a prophet, and says, go to David, go to King David, and tell him you got 3 choices. And none of these are good choices. Verse 13. So Gad went to David and said to him, "Shall there come on you 3 years of famine in your land, or 3 months of fleeing from your enemies while they pursue you, or 3 days of plague in your land? Now then, think it over and decide how I should answer the one who sent me." So God comes to Gad, says, go to David, and notice they're all 3s. It's either 3 years of famine, 3 months of fleeing, or 3 days of plague. 3 years of famine, which is a punishment, but it's not like the worst punishment. People can live through famines. People will die, but it'll just be a matter of trying to conserve food, and the people who will die are the ones who probably didn't prepare for a famine, or perhaps the poor of the society. The rich probably have stores of food. The poor probably don't. So, but it's 3 years, which is a long time. Or 3 months where your enemy's going to pursue you. And we know that would also include some deaths, and it would be 3 difficult months, but it would be over in 3 months. 3 years is a long time. 3 months, maybe not so long. When Noah was on the ark, right? It's when you add it all up, he was on the ark for a year. And so we, in the Hook family, would always tell our kids, you can do anything for a year. And, it's tough, it's difficult, but a year is a fixed amount of time. You can do anything for a year. So 3 months is something that you could survive, although there'll be some deaths, or 3 days of plague. Now, 3 days of plague sounds really, wonderful. Just 3 days, boom, it's done. But depending upon the plague, it could be very, very deadly. Which one would you choose? Would you choose 3 years of famine? Would you choose 3 months of fleeing from your enemies, or 3 days of plague? I probably would choose, I don't know. That's a hard choice. I'm more of the type of person that would try to want to get things over with. Like, you sinned as a kid, and your mom says, wait till your dad gets home, and you know that you're going to get the punishment from your father. You might just get it over with. If the sooner it happens, the sooner it's over with, and it's done with. When you can put it, 3 years of famine, it seems like a long time. I definitely wouldn't do that. I might do the 3 months of being chased by enemies, but more than likely I would take the 3 days of plague. Verse 14, David said to Gad, I am in deep distress. Let us fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great, but do not let me fall into human hands. So basically David's saying he wants to go with the plague. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel from that morning until the end of the time designated, and 70,000 of the people from Dan to Beersheba died. When the angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord relented concerning the disaster and said to the angel who was afflicting the people, enough, withdraw your hand. The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. When David saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to the Lord, I've sinned. I, the shepherd, have done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall on me and my family. So this is, unfortunately, God doesn't work that way, David. There are times when you are in a leadership position where you say, this is too much. I can't handle this. Just let me, take me instead. Give me peace. These people are suffering, and you're letting me be alive to see it. It's like if you want to, in movies, if you want to really, really get to somebody, you kidnap their wife or their kids, and you point a gun at their head and say, do what I'm going to do. Because being killed myself isn't all that hard. But having me watch the death of somebody I love in front of me, that is the tough one. And a lot of people don't have the ability to withstand that. I would say most people don't have the ability to withstand that. And so the fact that David had to be alive and see all this, the 70,000 people being destroyed, it was too much for him. And he's like, just stop it. Take me. Don't do this to the people. They're just following me. They elected me king. I'm the one who's responsible. The buck stops with me. Take my life instead. And I think that's where God wanted David. God wanted David to understand that he was king because of God. And kings come with a certain amount of responsibility. And the moment you make it about you and your pride and your throne, that's when things go south. And David is just being reminded again by God that everything about David, his whole kingship, was there because of God. He begs God, let me, what have they done? Let it fall on me. And then God relents. Verse 18. On that day, Gad went to David and said to him, go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. So David went up as the Lord had commanded through Gad. When Araunah looked and saw the king and his officials coming toward him, he went out and bowed down before the king with his face to the ground. And he said, why is my lord the king come to his servant? To buy your threshing floor, David answered, so I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague of the people may be stopped. Araunah said to David, let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering, and here are the threshing sledges, and the ox yokes is for the wood. Your majesty, Araunah, gives all this to the king. Araunah also said to him, may the Lord your God accept you. But the king replied to Araunah, no, I insist on paying you for it, for I will not sacrifice to the Lord my burnt offering that cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen and paid 50 shekels of silver for them. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. And then the Lord answered his prayer on behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was stopped. So he goes down to the threshing floor. He wants to build an altar. Araunah's there. He says, I give it to you. I'll give you all this. Just stop the plague. And David says, this is my problem. This has to come from me. The sacrifice has to be for me. So he pays the man for all this stuff, and then he builds the altar. And it's not really a sacrifice if it's not a sacrifice. If you don't give anything, then it's not a sacrifice. It's David could have easily said, all right, I'll take all this stuff, but there would not have been anything that David would have given. And for the sacrifice to be pure, or to be efficacious, that's a big fancy word, for it to be effective, it had to have some skin in the game from David. And so David pays for the whole entire threshing floor, builds an altar, sacrifices. The link between sacrifice and sin is strong in everything. The sin always requires a sacrifice. And it usually is somebody else can't take the punishment for you. It requires you. The only person that can take a sacrifice for us is Jesus. That he's powerful enough and big enough that he can take on the sacrifice. And that's what he did, right? He took on the sacrifice for us. So the plague stops. And I guess we can end it there for today. Yeah, it's time. Let's close. Gracious God, thank you for your sacrifice in our life, and watch over us today until we meet again. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Let me go over here to Facebook. Thank you for all of you joining me. Yes, working from home is awesome and quite wonderful. I work from home for 2 days. One is kind of answering emails, planning, and all that sort of thing. And then the other one is preparing my sermon. I typically try to take a whole day just to write it and record it and all that sort of thing. So, and I find I can work from the office. It's not a problem. I can't take a Zoom call because it just doesn't work. But I can do a lot of things from the office, but it's really hard writing a sermon or doing paperwork that requires concentration because it's in an environment where people are constantly in and out. And so I consider it like professor's hours. And if you had a professor in college, but they would post hours on their day and say, if you want to see me, these are the hours. That's kind of what I do. It's like, these are the days I'm in. See me on those days. If it's an emergency, call me. But otherwise, let's schedule it on a day I'm in. Doesn't always work that way. All right. So thank you for joining me. And I pray you have a great day in the Lord. Let me find my cursor. And we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.